G'day mates! At $399 Australian dollars, the 40 volt pruning saw is half the size but not quite half the price of Makita's chainsaw range. Is it any good, or should you just stick with your reciprocating saw? In the box we have 100 mils or 3 ounces of bar oil, a 4 mil or 5/32 of an inch file, user manual, and we've got the pruning saw. And there we go, we've got the pruning saw. The 55mm reservoir uses the same mechanism on Makita's outstanding 403 pole saw attachment, though you won't find any capacity markings on the reservoir for this model. The 6-inch bar gets you a practical cutting length of 150mm or the full 6 inches, and the guard gets right out of the way, but doesn't seem easy to remove without a complete disassembly if you're that way inclined. At $400, I'm expecting it to be a bit more useful than cutting 1-inch branches, so I thought I'd start with a full send on a 180mm or 7-inch tree stump. It's certainly no 300mm pole saw or chainsaw, but to be fair, it turns out that this vibrating sound is what happens when you hit a mesh fence in the middle of your tree. But moving on to a 5-inch root, and the saw performs quite well in this fairly awkward space. It certainly performs better on smaller sections, and it was handy to chip away in tight spaces where a 300 or 400mm bar would be tricky to handle. This kind of work did result in the chain jumping quite frequently though, and every time it did, it took another notch out of the plastic guard or the gear housing. While editing this video on a flight back from Mackay, the bloke next to me noticed what I was working on and piped up with, "Oh, I've got the 18 volt pruning saw. Cheers, Jeff." While they look near identical, there are quite a few more vents on the 40 volt version. Both have the same safety switch on both sides of the unit, so they can be used left or right handed. The 40 volt version on the left looks a lot thinner than the 18 volt on the right, but they actually have the same 221mm or 8.7 inch circumference around the grip. Weighing each unit full of oil but without any batteries, and the 40 volt unit comes in at 1.49 kilos or 52.5 ounces, and the 18 volt comes in slightly lighter at 1.41 kilos or just under 50 ounces. For comparison, a reciprocating saw is more than twice the weight at 3.15 kilos or 111 ounces. So in the spirit of fairness, I've grabbed 2 new chains for our comparison. Both housings have a flip-out lever to give you some leverage and are easy enough to loosen on their own and retighten. The automatic chain tensioner clicks into the shortest adjustment using a spring and depression mechanism to keep the chain tight. Once you've got the chain on and put some pressure on the bar, the self-tensioning spring automatically tightens the chain. It is possible to stuff up the placement of the chain on the gear, so keep an eye out for that. While they look fairly identical, the 40 volt has a nice recess to help you undo the sprocket cover, and they both have the brilliant oil tank cap that I first came across in my pole saw attachment review. Is this notch for the cord? Is it an overflow? Like, it seems useful, but I'm not sure why it's useful. As you know, I'm a big fan of the 40 volt powerhead along with the EY403 pole saw attachment, and really look for any excuse to use it because it's just so good. But a pole saw is pretty ungainly when you're just trying to cut branches into more manageable pieces, hence my reason to grab myself the pruning saw. The 40 and 18 volt both advertise a chain speed of 8 meters per second, and on first impression, they do sound identical. For the first run, I haven't put any downward pressure on either tool and have just let them cut through on their own. For the second run, I've used a bit more pressure and increased it for each run until the tool will stall. The 40 volt has noticeably more torque, getting through 100mm or 4 inches in just over 3 seconds compared to 5 seconds for the 18 volt. I had a brand new rough tooth blade for the reciprocating saw, but I gave up before I even got halfway. Testing the runtime, and I managed 81 cuts with a 5 amp hour 18 volt battery and 93 cuts with the 2.5 amp hour 40 volt battery. The second log was a fair bit thicker for the 40 volt, but I should point out that my 40 volt battery is also a few years newer than my 18 volt. I'm sure if you had a reciprocating saw, you've probably already used it for cutting smaller branches, and to be fair, it did the job extremely well. But in the spirit of going all out, I spent another $40 and picked myself up the holster too. It's the same holster for the 18 or 40 volt saws with a metal base and plastic housing with a slot for the guard, which holds the saw nice and snugly in place. It is directional though, so if you are left-handed, it's not really designed for the saw to be going in the other way. Anyway, time to whip out the holster, which for some reason I thought would come with a belt, but nope, that's an optional accessory for your optional accessory. It does come with a retention strap, which is frankly pretty hopeless at retaining the saw. It has a button to keep it in place, but takes fairly little effort for it to unclip. But the pruning saw and holster are an absolute perfect combination for one-handed operation, trimming branches down to a manageable size for my mulcher. So, what's the verdict? I was pleasantly surprised to find not just a sharpener, but a file guide with handle. But a few things are weird, like why does the nut housing have all these grooves in it which clog up with sawdust? Like seriously, why are all these little squares in here? It's the same for the 18 and 40 volts, except you get a Phillips head screw for whatever this part is for. And you'll clamp the guard against the bar when you go to sharpen it, except there isn't actually a locking pin to keep the guard out of the way. And I'd be interested to know if you've got a better idea than a piece of wire bent around to one of the screw holes to keep it in place. I get that you probably can't lock it up for safety's sake, but at least it is pretty easy to move it out of the way when you want to perform an undercut. The guard also cops a hiding every time the chain jumps off, and I've got plenty of efficiency holes in mine already. But what I do love is the ability to work it into tight spaces, and the effectiveness in cutting through anything under 4 inches. Paired with the holster and capable of near 100 cuts with a 2.5 amp hour battery, and it's an absolute dream to use when getting through a pile of branches. It's super light, has a great runtime, excellent torque, and is $200 cheaper than an actual 40 volt chainsaw. Surprisingly, the 40 volt version is even $20 less than the 18 volt. It's pretty outstanding, but so it should be at $400. 4.5 stars. Thanks heaps for watching. If you made it this far, it'd be awesome if you consider subscribing. I've only got 111 more to go before I can ask my accountant brother to start tax deducting all these tools I buy. It'll really annoy him. See you in the next one. Cheers.